I'm Priscilla Clarkson, and I'm Dean of Commonwealth Honors College, the premier honors college in New England. However, if you are an honors student, and most of you in here tonight are, by the time you graduate, you will be graduating from one of the top honors colleges in the country. We have many changes coming along, including new ways to get honors, new courses, new faculty, and of course, the new residential honors college. So stay tuned. Lots of good news is on its way, and the value of your degree is rising. I welcome you tonight to the inaugural Honors Faculty Lecture Series. This series is designed to enhance your classroom experience. Over the semester, we will have some of the top faculty share their perspectives regarding the themes of the Honors Seminar course called Ideas That Change the World. We launched this course last semester, and student evaluations were overwhelmingly positive. We hope you'll find this as well. The purpose of this course is to bring students from different majors together to discuss great ideas and very influential thinkers. We expect that you, the students, will come to see your own potential for original thinking and leadership by interacting with other honor students, with the great authors assigned in the course, and with your very talented instructors. It takes a versatile and committed teaching staff to offer a course like this that cuts across many disciplines and fields of knowledge. We have some of the best teachers on campus. Two people were instrumental, with input from many others, in developing this course. I'd like to recognize them. Alex Phillips, are you here? Where's Alex? Alex is over there. Please give Alex a round of applause. And Dan Gordon. Professor Gordon is our Associate Dean for Commonwealth Honors College, and I would like him to introduce tonight's speaker, so please welcome Dan Gordon.
It is with the utmost displeasure that I introduce Professor Scott Auerbach of the Chemistry Department. In fact, if it were up to me, he would not be granted an opportunity to speak tonight. For I accuse him, Professor Auerbach, of corrupting the youth of UMass Amherst. There must be something wrong with someone who's a faculty member in two different departments, chemical engineering and chemistry. Why is he not satisfied with being a specialist in only one, like most professors? And there must be something wrong with someone who has started an entirely newfangled program called ICONS, Interdisciplinary Concentrations in Science. Instead of having science students memorize factual information from textbooks, he suggests that they should orient their studies around the world's great problems and then learn the science that they need to do to solve those problems. Even more, he dares to suggest that the students themselves could articulate what those problems are instead of simply being told by the professors what the most important problems in the world are. All right, well, enough of the joke. Scott Auerbach is truly one of the most passionate and innovative educators in the United States today. I've alluded to some of his accomplishments as if I were criticizing him. I could recite many other achievements that he has as a scientist, as a teacher, as a thinker. He's even known to write poetry. But without further ado, and to enhance your experience by giving him the podium, please join me in welcoming Professor Scott Auerbach.
Thank you. So good evening.
Good evening.
You're better than that. Good evening.
Good evening.
Nice. So it's my real pleasure to thank all the students and staff, all the faculty, my family and friends for coming out tonight. in the snow. And to thank, of course, Dean Clarkson and Dean Gordon for the chance to come here to share some of my thoughts on a subject that's near and dear to my heart. Of course, Plato's Cave. I mean, it's not often that a chemist gets to talk about Plato. So I'm going to actually start at the end. And the end is the punchline. What I'm going to ask you to look for in this talk are the three themes of the cave: shadows, true light, and shadows. So I'm actually going to start by turning off my cell phone, and I might ask you to do the same. Good. I'm also going to dedicate this talk to the memory of Father Tom King. He was a mentor of mine in college at Georgetown. He was a brilliant man with an even bigger heart. So I'd like to take this moment to have a moment of silence, please. Thank you very much. So we're here to hear about the cave, and I'd like to share with you a certain cave that I know, which has to do with my speech. So I have a speech pattern where sometimes I get stuck on words, which is kind of crazy because I have a job to talk a lot. And I actually share this with you for three reasons. One reason is that when I get stuck on words, you'll know what's going on. I'm not like having a brain freeze. And the second reason is that you actually get to guess what's the word that he's going to say next. Is he going to say periodic table, epistemology, what's going to come? But the third reason, and maybe the real reason, is I hope to inspire you not to let little tiny barriers get in the way of your dreams. This is my dream job, and it's the job that's brought me here tonight, and that's a privilege. Okay, so I'd like to take a minute to talk about what's so special about the Honors College. As you know, the three most important things about real estate are location, location, location. The three most important things about really good scholarship: questions, questions, questions. It's been said that if you have a good question, you're halfway to the answer. Now, what happens most of the time in college is that a professor will pose a question, and then we'll ask you to find the answer, maybe teach you the skills, maybe not. But what's special about the Honors College is not only do you have to find the answers, but you have to pose your own questions. But to be good at that, that takes practice. And so we're going to have that right now. So what I'd like you to do, many of you will notice that there are these sheets. So what you'll find is that there are chairs that have these sheets, and those chairs, that's a team. And there are chairs that do not have these sheets, and that's also a team. So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to form teams of 2. And right now, here and now, I'd like you to discuss for a minute, maybe 2, in your teams, what are the questions that you walked into the room with? What are the questions that you'd like me to answer on Plato's Cave? So please start now.
sure you're okay. This is basically for the class.
30 seconds, please. 30 seconds.
Great speaker.
Five, 4, 3, 2, 1. Thank you. Now I'd really like to hear some of the questions that you have. So please, we have people with mics. Just raise your hand and somebody will give you a mic. We have a question right there.
The title of this whole talk thing is Are You in Plato's Cave? Why is it literally an R to you?
Excellent question. Thank you for that question. Now, I have to say that I'm not going to answer the questions right now. Right now, we're collecting. Hopefully, during the course of this talk, everything will be crystal clear. Please, more questions. Más preguntas.
How does our culture's excessive use of cell phones relate to the allegory of the cave?
Thank you. Good question. We shall see. Any other questions, please? I'm sure you are burning. Yes, please.
What does the cave symbolize?
What does the cave symbolize?
What does the cave symbolize? Excellent question. Thank you for that. Yes.
Do ideas from 2,500 years ago still really apply today?
Terrific question. I wonder that myself. Yes.
Why is a chemistry professor talking about Plato?
That's an excellent question. I'm wondering that myself. Well, I would like to share with you, if it's okay, what I thought you might ask. And I have to say, the first question I thought you might ask is, what's such a big deal about a used clothing store? But no, I didn't really think you'd ask that. These are the questions that I thought you'd ask. I thought you'd ask the question, what is Plato's cave about? Why are we still reading this after 2,400 years? What does this have to do with me? And why is the letter U, or are you, in the title of this talk? So you all asked good questions. I have to admit there were a couple other questions I thought we might get. What does Auerbach, a chemist, know about any of this? And finally, the, of course, ever-present, how do I get an A? Okay. So we're at the stage where it's finally time to hear the story of the cave. And as you know, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And a video often has 1,000 pictures. So without any further ado, what I'd like to do is I'd like to show you this award-winning video by Bullhead that will tell you the story of the cave.
Imagine prisoners that have spent their entire lives chained deep inside a cave. They have been chained so that they cannot see behind themselves, and they are forced to stare endlessly at the cave wall in front of them. Behind them, a fire is burning, and between the prisoners and the fire is a raised walkway. Now imagine that each day, a menagerie of objects crosses the walkway. Animals, and people carrying their wares to market. Their shapes create an intricate shadow play on the wall in front of the prisoners. This is the only world that the prisoners have ever known.
That's me.
The shadows and the echoes of unseen objects. Now, imagine that a prisoner is released. After some time adjusting to the blinding light, the freed prisoner will begin to experience the world outside of the cave for the very first time. And it is like nothing he could have ever imagined. Perception of the world, the man will of course want to return to his friends to share his incredible discoveries. But the prisoners cannot recognize their old friend. He appears as all things do. His voice is a distorted echo, and his body is a grotesque shadow. They cannot understand his fantastic stories of the world outside of the cave. To them, it will never exist. This, of course, does not make the world outside of the cave any less real.
Whoa. What is Plato trying to tell us? Well, as I said, shadows, true light and shadows. The bad news is that in general, we think we're seeing and hearing the real world. We're only hearing echoes. We're only seeing shadows. But the good news is, true light is possible, and it comes in the form of abstract forms, the form of beauty, of goodness, of justice. This is not an example of a beautiful thing or an example of justice. These are abstractions. These are unchanging. It's hard to see them, though, because of shackles. We are attached to the senses, our illusion of change. And according to Plato, the focus of the Republic, this gives rise to injustice. Why is Plato so focused on injustice? Well, as my friend Chris Oppie says, everything has a history. And the history here relates to the death of Socrates. Here's a very famous painting, Socrates reaching for the hemlock. I should say, by the way, that the poison in hemlock is chemically very similar to nicotine, FYI. But here's Socrates. As he's reaching for the hemlock, he's essentially flipping, the bird at the people who sentenced him to death. So to understand the history, we need to look at some dates. So the Peloponnesian War ended in 404 BC. Athens lost to Sparta. The Athenian democracy was replaced by a more conservative council trying to consolidate power, and they saw Socrates as a threat to that power. So it's no coincidence that 5 years later he died. At this stage, Plato is 29. In this painting, here's Plato. Now, he doesn't look 29, because when you're that smart and they paint a painting of you, you have to be gray and bald. But anyway, he is obviously completely crushed. He's crushed that his mentor has been sentenced to death. And so he sees this as a huge injustice, and about 20 years later, the book The Republic is born. So Plato, because of this injustice, felt that Athenian rulers were unfit to lead, and he devised in the Republic the notion of a philosopher king. Now, think about this. Plato is looking for a new generation of leaders. Who is he talking to? He wants to find the best and brightest. He wants to find the youth who can be the next generation of leaders. He is talking to the Commonwealth Honors College, of course. And what is he saying? Book 7 describes the curriculum for how you go from being inside the cave to outside the cave. He says you need a heavy dose of math, astronomy, and philosophy. Now you might imagine that you need math because it's good for economics and it's good for counting up troops and using geometry to parcel up lands. You might need astronomy because it's good for navigation for your army and your navy. You might need philosophy for legal issues, for persuasion. These all have great applications. Is that what Plato's talking about? No. Plato is saying that if you study these things, you will hone abstract thought to the level where it will reveal the ideal forms of justice, of goodness, etc. And once you get to that stage, you render public service, you return to the cave to enlighten others through teaching and leadership, eventually through the philosopher king. So in summary, Plato is making 5 bold statements. The first one is bad news. The bad news is that the normal state of awareness of human beings is just really fantastically low. We're in the cave. We're only hearing echoes, we're only seeing shadows. But the good news is really good, and that is that perfection of the soul is possible for the living. That makes Plato a mystic. This is a certain kind of mysticism. There are very few traditions that say that perfection of the soul is possible for the living. Of course, Buddhism being the main one. And when you reach this perfection of the soul, he says that it reveals the abstract forms of the good and the just. The pathway is a massive dose of math, astronomy, and philosophy. Plato is saying, he's putting a lot of store, a lot of faith in logic and in language. And this pathway is for the elite few who will become the philosopher kings. So that's pretty much the cave. And in order to think about whether these ideas are actually important, whether these ideas have changed the world, we have to do 2 things. First thing we have to do is we have to look for them in our own culture. And the second thing we have to do is we have to criticize them. So let's do the first thing first. Plato's cave in modern culture. Now, of course, Plato has influenced generations of philosophers, of scholars. But what about society at large? Well, of course, the fact that I'm asking the question means the answer must be yes. And in a sense, the most obvious manifestation is the movie, The Matrix. So in The Matrix, here we have a picture of the Matrix cave, where we actually have people in actual pods. So those are the shackles. These are the shackles. They're real shackles. They're stuck. And the shadows are the perception of reality from the Matrix program. And the true light that they get is what is the world that they see when they come out of the pods. So to see how this maps onto Plato, look at some of these quotes. If real is what you can feel, smell, taste, and see, then real is simply electrical signals interpreted by your brain. A study of reality, that's metaphysics. Like everyone else, you were born into bondage, into a prison that you cannot taste or see or touch, a prison of your mind. The limitation of your mind, that's epistemology. And finally, but when you're inside, you look around, what do you see? You see businessmen, teachers, lawyers, carpenters, the very minds of the people we're trying to save. You have to understand most of these people are not ready to be unplugged. Many of them are so inured, so hopelessly dependent on the system, they will fight to protect it. People fighting to protect institutions, that's politics. So what this movie does is it shows really beautifully how Plato in the Republic has integrated these 3 fields, metaphysics, epistemology, and politics. The Matrix is not so useful for us, though, because what it says is in order to get out of the cave, you need to shoot your way out of the cave, and we're not going to be doing it. So that means what we need is a little bit more subtle representation of the cave. And I offer for you the movie Tommy, which came out in the year 1975. The music came out by The Who in the year 1968. It was performed in its entirety at Woodstock in 1969. I was 3, so my parents would let me go. But anyway, what would be awesome is if we could watch the entire movie right now. But unfortunately, we do not have time. So, my friend Chaz Nielsen, UMass graduate, 2006, has put together a 6-minute capsule of the movie. So without any further ado, I give you Tommy. Tommy is now in the cave.
Now he's deaf, now he's dumb, now he's blind.
This is a layman's end to leave the cave.
Your woman, I wish you
Tommy has left the cave. Now, the title of this is Ideas That Change the World. I would say that rock and roll is an idea that changed the world. It certainly has changed mine. So what we need to do, as usual, is we need to think about shadows, true light, and shadows. Now, obviously, from what we just saw, in the shadows, not only is there shadows, Tommy couldn't see anything. He was deaf, dumb, and blind. The true light was the miracle cure. And the shackles, well, you could say it was like a psychosomatic response to some parental, abuse. But there's actually something missing here. There's something about this particular story that doesn't quite map on to Plato. And the hint is right here, the number 1. So I've obviously not obviously, but how many people know the whole story? How many people have seen the movie? Okay, there's some key stuff that I've left out. What have I left out?
Pinball wizard.
Okay, the pinball wizard. That's right. So he manages to be the pinball wizard when he's deaf, dumb, and blind. But what have I left out after he gains? Yes?
Once he gains a cult following, it almost
That is exactly right. What happens is, after he gains his senses, he engages in messianic preaching. He opens up a holiday camp so people can pay money to play pinball, deaf, dumb, and blind, so they can become aware like him. Obviously, that's not going to work. They rebel, and they kill his family. So there's sort of an important lesson here, and that is that to truly get out of the cave, there must be sacrifice. Sacrifice. And the other important lesson is that sometimes, Plato's cave, he kind of makes it sound like you work hard for 25 years on math, philosophy, and stuff, and then you're out of the cave. Like it's one step. But oftentimes, it's a multiple step process. You come out of a cave, and you think you see the light, well, you're just in a bigger cave. And that's what happened with Tommy, and that's going to be a theme that we're going to see later on in this talk. Now, there are some quotes here that make it clear that this really maps on to Platonic thinking. For example, how can men who've never seen light be enlightened is a quote from Tommy. That's right out of Plato, because Plato says that change is an illusion. So how can our minds change if change is an illusion? How can we see light if we've never been enlightened? Here's a quote: freedom tastes of reality. In 4 words, we integrate politics and metaphysics. And finally, Messiahs pointed to the door. No one had the guts to leave the temple or the cave. So this is definitely an imprint of Plato. So it's clear that Plato has impacted, modern society. Now the question is, who's actually escaped from the cave? In addition to Tommy and Neo from the Matrix, who's escaped from the cave? Who's actually real? Well, of course, it depends on who you ask and when. Here's a very famous answer. The School of Athens, painted by Raffaello Sanzio, or Raphael, 500 years ago. So this is the Pentacentennial, one of the most famous Renaissance paintings in the world. And if you go to this website, you click on each of these people, and you see who they are, when they lived, and what they did. And it's so beautiful, we have to blow it up. So there it is, the School of Athens. Who do we see? We see Plato pointing up to the ideals, to the abstract forms. His best student, Aristotle, pointing forward to the earthly causes. Aristotle agrees that form is important, but it's only one of 4 important causes. It's 1/4 of the picture. Here's Socrates, again corrupting the youth. And so when we go through here, I should ask you, in this painting, what do you think are the 3 fields of study that are the most represented? Mathematics, astronomy, and philosophy. You are correct. So clearly, Plato's cave. Now, if we go through this, we see Pythagoras right here. Pythagoras, the father of trigonometry. He's also the first person in Western culture we know of to integrate logic and religion. We have Zeno right here, the hooded figure who set forth the philosophical foundation of calculus. Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. We have Euclid right here bending over, the father of geometry. We have Ptolemy right here holding the orb, who explained the motions of all the heavenly bodies. The only thing that he got wrong was he thought the earth was at the center of the universe. Well, he had a 50-50 shot. And then we have Hypatia right here, the first well-known female mathematician. And finally, we have the artist himself, Raffaello. Boy, that is chutzpah. Raffaello, to paint himself into the painting right here. Now, the interesting thing of what we get to do here is by interpreting the meaning of this painting, we get a deeper understanding of the cave, but it also opens up the opportunity to criticize the cave. So in order to interpret this painting, it's first very useful to know who paid for the painting, and that happens to be Pope Julius II. He died 2 years after the painting was complete. It's the same Pope who commissioned the painting of the Sistine Chapel. That was Michelangelo. So with that as a backdrop, it's very useful to think about the subjects. Obviously, we have a mixture of ancient Greeks and Renaissance figures. There's two ways that that's done. Obviously, we explicitly have some ancient Greeks and some Renaissance figures, but also Raphael did a very interesting thing. He actually, see, this is Plato. You know who he looks like? Leonardo da Vinci. And this is Heraclitus. Guess who he looks like? Like Michelangelo. So he's kind of double dipping there. And the idea is to have a mix of all these scholars. It's a way to integrate centuries of progress. So that's kind of the superficial understanding. A deeper understanding, a deeper interpretation. Remember, this was painted for the Pope. And all these Greeks here, all these ancient scholars, they were not baptized in the name of Jesus Christ. They're going to hell. So what Raphael may have been saying is that all who seek truth should be seen as equal in the eyes of the church. So that's an interesting kind of interpretation. Maybe Raphael was trying to get the Pope out of a certain cave. Now if we think about the architecture is obviously beautiful. Apollo and Minerva. We have beautiful tessellated arches here. And look at the effect of these. The perspective focuses the eye. There we go. The perspective focuses the eye on the main figures. But the thing that really captures me is if we think about this beautiful architectural structure as a symbol of the power of logic. If you notice all the shadows here, this building is wide open. You can see the sky. And so what that's telling me is the limits of logic. And so now we get to think about criticizing, Plato in terms of the limits of logic. And if there are limits of logic, if logic alone is in a sense a sort of a cave, then what we're saying is these people came out of the cave as far as they possibly could with logic. But are they completely out of the cave? That's the question. And in order to think about how to balance, we need to move forward to another idea that changed the world. The idea of balance, yin and yang. So before I go through this, I'd like to tell you a funny story of an experience I had when I was a college student. I was really taken by this symbol. I think it's fascinating. I think the philosophy behind it is fascinating. Now, as a young physical chemistry student, the first thing that I did when I saw this symbol was I put it on its side. Because when you do that, what do you see? You see two particles and a wave. And you see a plus and a minus. This, my friends, is the hydrogen atom. This is the quantum mechanical hydrogen atom. And so if you use this, what you can get is you can get the quantum states of hydrogen. And if you put this structure into three-dimensional space, you can reveal the dynamical nature of matter. So I really thought I was onto something. This is a radically new idea until my friend showed me this book that was 12 years old at the time. And what it did say is, in fact, it's an interesting idea, but oops, I got scooped. So anyway, there's a lot of power to this symbol, and I want to take you through why this is relevant to the cave. So this notion of yin-yang and balance, there are many people who've thought about balance. Buddha with the middle way, Aristotle, the golden mean, Hegel, with the dialectic. So there are many people who bump into this idea. So the fundamental idea is that, yes, they're abstract forms, but guess what? They come in complementary pairs. For example, masculine and feminine. Or, for another example, black and white. See, if the only color we had in the whole wide world was white, the concept of white would lose its meaning, and we wouldn't even have the word. It's only by virtue of being able to compare white with black that white gets its meaning. And by the way, so does black. So white and black are inextricably interwoven in terms of their meaning. And so the yin-yang idea is that the world involves complementary pairs that gain meaning through each other. So for example, in the physical world, we have these here, and what I would add now, because of quantum mechanics, is wave and particle. But you know what? We're here to talk about states of mind. And so the message of my talk is that there are yin and yang states of mind. So to give you a feeling for this, I put first word and image. So word, I claim, is a very yang state of mind. For example, consider this. This is a yang kind of experience of the mind. The corresponding yin experience of the mind is shown there. These are complementary ways to communicate, and clearly very different. In addition to that, we have reason and faith. Now, we're in a culture right now where we're taught that these are adversarial, but I claim they're not. I think that they're complementary and they gain meaning and power through the complementarity. I can tell you, as a scientist, that I use reason and faith every day. Of course, it's a leap of faith to submit, a grant proposal, that's for sure. But the real leap of faith is to assume that the world can be understood. And on top of that, it's a leap of faith to make the leap from empiricism to rationalism. If I measure something 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times, at some point, my graduate students, I know they're in the audience, hello graduate students, thank you, hello, they say, enough. If I measured it 1,000,000 more times, it's going to be the same thing. That is a leap of faith, and it's the leap of faith that underlies science. So science is a mixture, a yin-yang mixture of reason and faith, and guess what? So is religion. Distinction and connection. With respect to human beings have a natural need for distinction. We want to feel special. We have a natural need for connection. We want to be, part of something. But with respect to the mind, as a chemist, I look at this room and I use the mode of distinction. I would list all the different atoms. There's carbon, there's hydrogen, there's oxygen, there's nitrogen, there's sulfur, there's phosphorus, there's probably some iron, and maybe some copper, and that's about it. But that doesn't tell me the whole picture. In order to understand why this air is different from that stage, I have to know how these things are connected. In addition to that, language. Language is fundamentally yang, because the fundamental construct in language is the separation, the dichotomy of subject and object. That's fundamental to language. So language is a heavily yang kind of experience. Now, the modes of understanding of the world that we have right now, the two complementary pairs, are reductionism versus holism. As a scientist, most scientists right now subscribe to the notion that the mind can be understood in terms of biology, functional MRI. That biology can be understood in terms of chemistry, DNA and proteins. That chemistry can be understood in terms of physics, protons, neutrons, electrons. I'm basically a gigantic bag of particles. That's all I am. That's the reductionist kind of viewpoint. But what we're starting to see is that in order to understand this incredible complexity, we can't break it up. We have to look at it in its whole. And so science is trying to connect the dots here. Now, in terms of the anatomy of yin mind and yang mind, the left brain is the home of yang, and the right brain is the home of yin. And just like Plato made his bold, assertions, my bold assertion is that sustained imbalance between yin mind and yang mind is like being a prisoner in a cave. Now, it's one thing, I should say, Plato is heavily into yang. He's basically in a world of yang, math, philosophy, and astronomy. So I claim that what he's done is he's been able to come out of the cave as much as the yang mind can, but he's not completely out of the cave. Now, it's one thing if I were a poet or a musician or an artist to say, come on, gang, let's move over to the yin. But I'm a scientist, so that's different. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to give you an example of what I think is an example of imbalance, and I'll give you one of balance. So the first question is example of unbalanced state of mind. And in order to do this, I'd like to set this up by reminding you something about Martin Buber. Martin Buber, in 1923, published a seminal piece of work called I and Thou, or I and You. And what it said is that there's two fundamentally different ways that human beings must communicate. A is the practical communication, like, I'll be home at 7, or, gotta get bananas. Or a business kind of transaction. I, thou, in contrast, is authentic human connection. Now I want to throw this out to you. I think you know what's coming next. Obviously, human connection is something that we all need. And I want to ask you, do you think that texting will give authentic human connection? Throwing that out. To a certain point. No. Okay, so I hear a no and I hear a yes. Let me hear your no. What's behind the no?
The reason why it's a no is because, first of all, texting is at the hands of a corporation. It can be easily surveillance. And it also allows for such short messages most of the time. It's also hard to type longer ones, which means the discussion and deep thought usually cannot be presented. Although, of course, be that school appeal with Ernest Hemingway's, they'll be like, yo, short sentences can be very big ideas. But in the end, I don't think they're good for us.
Okay, thank you very much. I heard a yes. Yes. Can you speak up, please? Okay. Any other thoughts on this? Yes, please. Can you speak up nice and loud? Thank you very much. Yes, please. Okay. Yes, please. Thank you very much. Yes, please. Thank you. Yes, there was a hand in the back. Okay. Yes, right there, please.
Unequivocally, no. I mean, it's just an electronic transmission of coded data. Essentially, a highly practical, but very cut and dry. It doesn't really establish any kind of connection. It's just sending some information, which can be read either way. But it's not the same as having a person there and talking to them, or even speaking to them on the phone normally.
Thank you very much. Yes, please.
Are you defining authentic human
question. Yes! From the book Zen and the Art. I'm stuck on the word. Motorcycle maintenance. You know it when you get it.
Repeat the question.
The question was, how do you define authentic human connection? And my answer is, you know it when you get it. And I think we've all felt it. Yes, please.
To follow up on that, we expect that means language is evolving, it's always evolving. So it's, you can say it's a new kind of authentic communication. I know certain governments say it's not what we have, but it's evolved.
You were outside of the cave because I gave you yes and no, and you didn't take either of those, so that's good. It's not dumb. Okay, what do you think I'm going to say? How many people think I'm going to say yes, authentic human connection? How many people think I'm going to say no, not? Okay, let's see if you are correct. Well, here's the deal. Yin and yang. When you're texting, you're heavily in a yang mind experience. Human connection is a yin experience. You're in the wrong part of your brain. You're activating the wrong side of your brain, I claim. And so what happens is, because this is inauthentic kind of connection, some people make the mistake of thinking, well, that wasn't really satisfying, so I'm going to satisfy myself by doing it more and more and more, and that leads to obsessive texting. And this is what obsessive texting has to do with the cave. But lest you think my message is all gloom and doom, it is not, my friends. I bring you a message of hope. But actually, I don't bring you the message of hope. Jill Bolt Taylor brings you the message of hope. She had a stroke of insight. Now, this is a talk, I learned about this from a talk she had in TED, Technology, Entertainment, and Design. Ideas worth spreading is the tagline. Kind of sounds like ideas that change the world. So I really encourage you all to browse through this. It's an awesome, awesome website. In all cases, we have to ask the question, what are the shadows, true light, and shadows? And I'll give you a hint. There's my hint. So again, I'd like to show you the whole 18-minute video, but I cannot. So Chaz Nielsen, your editor, brings you a 7-minute video. Jill Bolt Taylor. Oops. That wasn't supposed to happen. I will try that again. Are you ready? I don't think you're ready for this. You're not ready for this. Are you ready? Are you ready? Well, I'm going to go right there.
I grew up to study the brain because I have a brother who has been diagnosed with a brain disorder, schizophrenia. On the morning of December 10, 1996, I woke up to discover that I had a brain disorder of my own. A blood vessel exploded in the left half of my brain. And in the course of 4 hours, I watched my brain completely deteriorate in its ability to process all information. On the morning of the hemorrhage, I could not walk, talk, read, write, or recall any of my life. I essentially became an infant in a woman's body. If you've ever seen a human brain, it's obvious that the two hemispheres are completely separate from one another. And I have brought for you a real human brain. Thank you. So this is a real human brain. This is the front of the brain, the back of the brain with the spinal cord hanging down. And this is how it would be positioned inside of my head. And when you look at the brain, it's obvious that the two cerebral cortices are completely separate from one another. For those of you who understand computers, our right hemisphere functions like a parallel processor, while our left hemisphere functions like a serial processor. The two hemispheres do communicate with one another through the corpus callosum, which is made up of some 300 million axonal fibers, But other than that, the two hemispheres are completely separate. Because they process information differently, each of our hemispheres think about different things, they care about different things, and dare I say, they have very different personalities. Our right human hemisphere is all about this present moment. It's all about right here, right now. Our right hemisphere, it thinks in pictures, and it learns kinesthetically through the movement of our bodies. Information in the form of energy streams in simultaneously through all of our sensory systems, and then it explodes into this enormous collage of what this present moment looks like, what this present moment smells like and tastes like, what it feels like, and what it sounds like. And in this moment, we are perfect, we are whole, and we are beautiful. My left hemisphere, our left hemisphere, is a very different place. Our left hemisphere thinks linearly and methodically. Our left hemisphere is all about the past, and it's all about the future. Our left hemisphere is designed to take that enormous collage of the present moment and start picking out details, and more details about those details. It then categorizes and organizes all that information, associates it with everything in the past we've ever learned, and projects into the future all of our possibilities. And our left hemisphere thinks in language. It's that ongoing brain chatter that connects me and my internal world to my external world. It's that little voice that says to me, hey, you got to remember to pick up bananas on your way home. I need them in the morning. On the morning of the stroke, I woke up to a pounding pain behind my left eye. And it was the kind of pain, caustic pain, that you get when you bite into ice cream. And it just gripped me. And then it released me. And then it just gripped me. And then it released me. And it was very unusual for me to ever experience any kind of pain. So I thought, okay, I'll just start my normal routine. And I looked down at my arm, and I realized that I can no longer define the boundaries of my body. I can't define where I begin and where I end, because the atoms and the molecules of my arm blended with the atoms and molecules of the wall. And all I could detect was this energy. And I'm asking myself, what is wrong with me? What is going on? And in that moment, my right arm went totally paralyzed by my side. Then I realized, oh my gosh, I'm having a stroke. I'm having a stroke. And then the next thing my brain says to me is, wow, this is so cool. And in that moment, my brain chatter, my left hemisphere brain chatter, went totally silent. Just like someone took a remote control and pushed the mute button. Total silence. And at first I was shocked to find myself inside of a silent mind. But then I was immediately captivated by the magnificence of the energy around me. And because I could no longer identify the boundaries of my body, I felt enormous and expansive. I felt at one with all the energy that was, and it was beautiful there. And then all of a sudden, my left hemisphere comes back online, and it says to me, it's in the external world, and any stressors related to any of those, they were gone. And I felt this sense of peacefulness. And imagine what it would feel like to lose 37 years of emotional baggage. Oh, I felt euphoria. And my spirit soared free like a great whale gliding through a sea of silent euphoria. Nirvana. I found nirvana. And I remember thinking there's no way I would ever be able to squeeze the enormousness of myself back inside this tiny little body. But then I realized, but I'm still alive. I'm still alive, and I have found nirvana. And if I have found nirvana and I'm still alive, then everyone who is alive can find nirvana.
So she found her yin. She calls it La La Land. You can't live in La La Land because you forget to get bananas and stuff. But maybe we don't live there enough. Maybe the true light that she's found is left-right balance of her mind. And the shadows that she feels, and I would say the shadow that our entire culture is in right now, is dominance of the left brain. I believe that we are in a yang phase of our culture. And it's fascinating to wonder what are the shackles that have us in this. So, as my heroines and heroes that maybe will get us out of this, I offer, of course, Jill Bolt Taylor, as a brain scientist and a stroke sufferer, has taught us about the anatomy of mindfulness. The Dalai Lama, who is an expert in ancient mysticism, but also an avid student of modern physics, has elevated the role of doubt, not only in science, but also in religion. Our own Judy Young, Professor Judy Young, professor in the astronomy department. She's made seminal contributions to astronomy, but through her sun wheel next to the UMass football stadium, she's made a quantum leap in terms of human connection with the stars and with each other. And last but not least, Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, who died in the year 1955. He was a Jesuit priest and a paleontologist who came up with the theology of evolution. And he coined, with another thinker, the phrase noosphere, the sphere of the mind. We have the atmosphere, the air, the lithosphere, the earth, the hydrosphere, the oceans, and the biosphere, the sphere of life. But we also have a noosphere, the sphere of the mind. And he would say that the internet is tangible manifestation of that. He would say that the wires that connect the internet are the neurons of the noosphere. These are my heroes and heroines. So to close, Plato saw a problem: intellectual confinement, superficial thinking. His solution, he believed in perfection of the soul, but unfortunately only for few. Abstract and critical thought gained through math, astronomy, and philosophy was the way for him. We may quibble with this particular curriculum, but I think what we can take from this, and why we are still reading this after 2,400 years, is that there are shadows, namely, in my opinion, imbalance of yin and yang mind. Shackles. Why are we shackled in a yang phase? I don't know, but we can talk about it. And I believe that there is true light, and I think that Jill Bolt Taylor is a case of somebody who's found that. But I believe, as opposed to Plato, that is for the many. I believe that true light is yin-yang, balance of mind. And if there's a yin-yang that you can take away from this talk, as scholars, your job is to balance skepticism and open-mindedness. And if you can do that, you'll have the yin-yang power of mind to be happy. So with that, I'd like to thank, of course, Dean Clarkson and Dean Gordon for the chance to be here. I'd like to thank all the folks who helped me put this together. A lot of technical help from Chaz Nielsen, from Nick Auerbach, and Vishal Agarwal. Great ideas about balanced mind thinking from Megan Murphy and Shonda Pettiford for promotion. I put up the questions. Of course, this is just the beginning of our journey out of the cave. So if you want to come talk, this is where you come talk to me for authentic human connection, but if you must, send me an email. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Scott, for a truly thought-provoking and inspiring talk. Are you up for a few questions at this point, or would you prefer to greet people privately? How would you like to proceed?
I'd be happy to take questions.
Right.
If people would step up to the microphone here, make a little line and ask questions.
Hello.
Hello.
I've discussed this concept several times with my friends about what exactly is the thing that might hold humanity back. And one of my friends who believes especially in the concept of pathos over ethos and logos, believes that the biggest problem that holds us back, and the problem with whatever part of the mind you said, is shame. You think that's probably one of the biggest things that's holding back humanity?
Thank you for that question. That's a really beautiful question. In a sense, I think you're right. And I've been inspired to say this because actually of a video off the TED site that I recently saw. And it inspired me to think about this idea of authentic human connection. And what do we need to have that? What we need to do is we need to shed our fear of shame. And in order to do that, we need to be willing to be vulnerable. So I think that's the key. And if you go to the TED site, and I forgot the name of the person. Does anybody remember? I know some people in the audience have seen this. Well, I forgot the name. But anyway, there's a fantastic TED video on exactly that.
Scott, what is it that gives you confidence that the many can get out of the cave versus Plato, who believed that it's such a rigorous exercise that only a few can?
That's a terrific question. Thank you very much, Dan. It's because Plato relied on the power of the yang mind to be able to master intense mathematics, philosophy, and astronomy. And to me, that's not the key to getting out of the cave. The key to getting out of the cave is balancing your yin and your yang mind, to be able to cultivate them in an integrated way. And we both have a left brain and a right brain. We all, you, me, and all have a left brain and a right brain. And it's possible for us to cultivate them both in balance. And that's why.
I'm going to suggest that the many people out there who probably do have a question but don't want to express it publicly in a microphone join us up at the stage. Did you want to ask a question?
I have one question.
Perfect, go ahead.
What keeps balance from not being another cave?
Excellent question. Thank you very much. Aristotle said that we should seek moderation in everything, including moderation. So that means that there are times when we will have an intense yang experience. And we have to. When we're studying for that calculus test, we're having an intense yang experience. There are times when we'll have an intense yin experience. We have to. That's fine. The key is not that you constantly have to be, rigorously balanced. Remember I said that a prisoner in a cave is sustained imbalance. If you sustain imbalance, that's a problem. But if you have an experience where you're just, God, I'm loving calculus. I had this time when I'm such a geek. I broke my arm in high school, so I couldn't go out and play football. And so I had to stay home. And so what I did was I did all the integrals in my calculus book. I was just having an explosion of yang, and that's fine, because then I could go outside and I could do yin things. So moderation in everything, including moderation.
Hi.
Hi.
I would like you to talk about why you think there is a cave and an outside of the cave. Because I think that there really is no universal truth. Because anything that you learn or know, or you learn from someone else, is an extension of either your senses or someone else's senses, or tools you use to expand your senses, and they all have limits.
Okay, thank you very much. That's a terrific question. And in my thinking, so this is the thing about Plato's second, assertion, that there is true light. The perfection of the soul is possible for the living. And I believe that too. And I've been inspired by the Taylor thing. But I believe that this is a choice that we make. I believe that it's a choice. So the issue of, and this is a great question. The question is, at some point, if you're out of the cave, how do you know? Is there like a sign, you are now out of the cave? No. But what I believe is that if we constantly seek this balance, then maybe we will be getting, asymptotically closer. Asymptotically closer. So the question is there true light with a capital T or just with a small t, is the essence of the question that's been asked. And I think each of us has to choose the answer for ourselves. My choice is a capital T, and I've been inspired by this video.
Isn't yang about control?
To some extent, that is right. There's a lot of control in yang. And I think of my examples. Certainly science, of course, is very heavy yang because the idea is to predict and control. So science is very heavy yang. So yes, I would say so.
You say that texting is like the lack of connection between people because it's heavy words and heavy everything, but then isn't anything we've ever read from Plato or Aristotle all yang? Because obviously they're not there to have that actual authentic connection with us. So how does that, why can't we just say, well, it's a personal connection because you're hearing the words that someone once tried to say, but now they can't because they're not here.
It's a great question. If texting is not authentic human connection, then is any form of writing authentic human connection? And if not, what's missing? I'm actually going to throw that back at you. What's missing? Yes, please. Presence. What does that mean? What do you get from that? But I'm asking, what forms of communication do you get from presence? Yes, please. Yes, you get all the non-verbal cues. That's exactly right. Yes, please. What if you're blind? Does anybody here know anybody who's blind? Yes? Yes? And do you feel that you are able to have authentic human connection with that person? And do you feel that that person is able to have authentic human connection with you? Yeah. Yes, please.
Presence can be simulated with words. If you read a very good story, for example, where the author describes the picture of the scene as well as the words, then you can sort of get the same sort of thing because you get the idea of presence.
What do you think about that? Yes, please.
I think it can be summed up pretty simply. The fact that we're talking about it now, 500 years later, rather than what I said, my friend, what you're doing tonight, is quite a clear sign that it does have a certain presence because it resonates with people over time. I mean, I was, I guess, responding to the girl who asked if it's authentic to be connected now, Plato.
Looking for hands. Yes, please.
I think a funny thing to bring up, though, is Socrates would state that books and writing are not authentic. He thinks that the best way himself is to actually talk about it.
Yes, please.
I think that writing is an incredibly good form of communication for what it does, but in a way I think that it's looking at a photograph of a place where you can read there for several hours instead. And essentially in each case you are condensing something which is much larger. In the event of writing just to around 40 primary elements or symbols. So you can express a lot, but still you are going to limit the scope of what you can describe to just the combination of those characters. It's not the same as everything you have in real interaction. It's bigger than what you could ever put in writing.
Okay, thank you. Yes, please.
How about the texts that were sent at 9/11?
The texts that were sent in 9/11. I don't know about those. Can somebody elaborate?
The human connection, the people who were texting and communicating to the loved ones who were dying or about to die, would that be considered human connection?
Fantastic question. What do you think? If you're in the midst of death and you manage to send a text message. Yes, please.
Didn't we define human connection as something that you know when you feel it? So isn't this completely subjective? I mean, if you feel something, if you believe you feel something from a text message, then aren't you feeling it?
That's your choice. If you feel it, you feel it.
Scott, I think it's amazing that as a mathematician and chemist, you've created so much interesting questions about the nature of reality and communication and what's authentic. You've really been the ideal speaker for this new series of lectures to complement ideas that change the world. I just want to be sure to thank all the students for coming on a snowy night, and so many instructors who are here too. I just want to thank the audience while most of it is still here, but I also want to encourage you to stay for further discussion with Scott if you wish. But please join me now in just thanking him for what he's offered to us tonight. Thank you, Scott.
Hey, how you doing, buddy? Good to see you. I know. Good. Glad you came.